slow burn romance, found family, fake dating scenarios, all-powerful mages who are actually losers. An adoptive sister who doesn't actually harbor forbidden feelings for her brother, instead has a vaguely sapphic escapade with a cat girl where they try to set up her brother with a I'm giving the disgraced noble lady I rescued a crash course in naughtiness is not, as it sounds, a saucy romance anime. It is instead a social experiment to see how many different ways it can get my fandom poisoned best friend to, upon having the plot of each episode recounted to him, reflexively reply based, good, or peak fiction without his conscious brain having any say in the matter. The plot, set in a low-rent anachronistic fantasy land of nobles, mages, and Mermaid Spa Resorts, is basically 50 Shades of Grey if you replace BDSM with staying up past your bedtime. Alan Crawford, a name I swear I've heard elsewhere but which Google has nothing to say about, is a twunky hermit of a mage who comes across, you guessed it, a disgraced noble lady. This is Charlotte Evans, a proper Cinderella, born from a mistress and forced to do chores all day. She got framed for God knows what and was forced to escape into the wilds, where she runs into our manic pixie dream boy, Alan, who heart-throbbingly kicks the butt of all the people going after her, but spares all their lives to let us know he's not going to be one of those love interests. He harbors this runaway and quickly gets fed up with how submissive and selfless she is in everything she does, refusing to look after herself, lacking any hobbies, and not having the willpower to even muster hate towards the people who nearly got her executed on trumped-up charges. Alan, being the free-spirited, jerk-adjacent doofus with a heart of gold that he is, takes it upon himself to rehabilitate this poor abused soul by teaching her how to indulge the base urges of the human id, or as he calls it, teaching her to be naughty. This sounds like it's adults-only stuff, but as I said earlier, Alan's idea of being naughty is hilariously adorable. Eating sweets for dinner, staying up past midnight playing games, going on shopping sprees without a care for fiscal responsibility, these are the base pleasures that he wants to impart to Charlotte. The fact that he talks about it in a way that makes it sound like things are about to get NSFW at any moment is not a translation error and is, in fact, the joke. It is here that we get to the thing that makes this anime so incredibly interesting to me. It is not an utter masterpiece, it is merely quite good, but the ways in which it is good tickle that part of me that makes me feel like there's something important to learn here. In fact, it's a really good case study in something that I find quite fascinating, but which I've never seen discussed as a standalone notion within storytelling. Archetype layering. The concept of an archetype, such as that of the great hero of the hero's journey, is one that has been used when analyzing fiction for a very long time, but when we discuss archetypes, we usually do so from the perspective of the viewer, taking the end product as a monolith that stands on its own. An example of a modern-day archetype would be the Mary Sue. It's a type of character we've noticed via pattern recognition. This is quite distinct from the concept of a trope. A trope is a recurring concept found throughout many different stories as well, but rather than an aspect of the end product, it is seen from the viewpoint of how the story was created. Tropes are things the author chooses to include. The Mary Sue is not a trope. No one puts it into their story. It's merely something which comes out the other end if things go wrong. Things such as fake dating scenarios or spaghetti western-style standoffs, however, are specific, identifiable inclusions into a story. Those are what we refer to when we talk about tropes. Now, this idea was almost certainly not created via fandom, but it is within modern online fandom culture that it got as popular as it is. Fandoms seek not just to grapple with, but to understand the media which they consume, and so having an eye towards how it was assumedly created was a natural result. Discussion of tropes became quite frequent, and they even made a whole wiki about it. What emerged, however, was that many of these tropes grew into their own archetypes and began influencing the very fiction that wound up being created. First by influencing fan fiction, and then, well, fanfic writers became fiction writers, and this stuff wound up in actual original stories. For a fairly easy to understand example, take that of the fake dating scenario. This is a trope where two people pretend to date for some pragmatic reason, but then genuinely catch feelings for each other. This is a plot beat anyone can choose to put into their story, but when fandom people noticed this trope as a recurring idea and got a taste for it, they started seeking it out. People would make hypothetical fake dating scenarios for their favorite ships or claim they want to see more stories use this trope. But the mere inclusion of the trope is not enough to satiate these people. They aren't looking for the mere presence of this plot beat. They are looking for all of the attendant drama, the quiet pining, the despair over if the other person doesn't feel the same, the slow becoming of the mask. That's not just fake dating as a trope. That's fake dating as an archetype. Not a character archetype, but a plot beat archetype. Is there a word for that? Genre doesn't really fit. I'm just gonna go with plot beat archetype for now, because it gets the job done. The end result of this archetypification of tropes is a plethora of archetypes. One might even call it an excess. So what do you do when you want to have all of your favorite trope archetypes in a story? Well, you get to layering. Alan, as introduced, is a dark and brooding mage of incredible power, feared by those around him, and capable of suavely saving our damsel in distress. He's called the Demon Lord. But as time goes on, he's revealed to also be a giant softy and a total doofus. And notice that word. Also. What is happening here is not subversion. When Alan is revealed to have incredibly innocent ideas of what misbehaving entails, this thematically clashes with the idea of a dark, brooding, all-powerful heartthrob love interest. But it doesn't literally clash with it. There is no lore reason that these factors cannot coexist. Much like glass entering into vision as it catches the light, the different archetypes which Alan exemplifies, both the brooding, melancholy feet sweeper and the nerdy loser, fade in and out of focus based on the angle from which the narrative strategically views him. Fandom losers such as myself lose it over suave acts of riz, but also lose it over people too bashful to ever admit they have feelings for someone. And not only that, we are greedy Icaruskin who refuse to leave well enough alone. People like this don't just write a love interest who is one or the other, we write someone with accidental riz. Someone who frequently acts suave or even like a dark romance bad boy, but not with the intention of invoking the idea of flirting, all so that we can have our ship cake and eat it too. This general philosophy is the first principle from which the rest of the story was clearly derived. While it's not just a shallow attempt at forcing as many fun archetypes into a story as possible, that is the foundation on which the rest of the storytelling is built. Charlotte has a sister for 80,000 trope reasons, but the story still takes time to build up a very compelling dynamic between them. The single anecdote of there being this abused older sister who isn't even treated like family, but still being loved by the younger sister, with her asking the older sister constantly to read her a story, says so much, evokes so many emotions, and provides an enormous amount of context. And all of that is what makes it all work. If we didn't have this really well-written, if simple, backstory to draw on, Charlotte's reaction to Alan having a good relationship with his younger sister wouldn't be quite as moving. Which, it is. There is genuine pathos. The author wanted Charlotte to have a certain type of backstory for archetypal reasons, and he wanted the shipper-on-deck character as well, and they found how they could draw lines between these ideas to construct the pathos atop the archetypal storytelling. Charlotte's relationship with her sister also primes you to care about her sister when her sister shows up, and my god, if this girl is not the epitome of archetypal layering. She's a rebellious firebrand of a younger sibling who goes to a school for mages and wizards. And Charlotte, who's undercover, needs to get closer to her, so you have this thing where the younger sister has an affection for the older sister despite not actually knowing it's the older sister, but also, Charlotte needs to find excuses to get closer to her, so Alan has to pull on wingman tropes to save the day, finding excuses for the two to hang out. But also, the younger sister is a rough and tumble delinquent who's not only a prodigy and the boss of a whole gang, but she's also a jerk with a heart of gold who's a mother to her men, but also she has a fiery rivalry with discount Damien Desmond over here. And all of it hits because you were actually primed to care about her. So there's this really mid-anime called Dragon Pilot that was a Netflix original. It kind of just went through me. I only recalled two things about it. The first was that Price Bappenbrook had another role that furthered my theory that there was a period where he was being typecast as the heartthrob twink love interest who supports the strong-willed female lead. The other thing I remembered is that there was one episode that I actually really liked, and it was an episode where one character, breaks out a corkboard and tries to make sense of all the love triangles going on, and it just leads to a bunch of antics, and it felt so much like the writers were just letting themselves have fun with the characters. That's kind of what all of Lessons in Naughtiness feels like. It's like the writer is playing with the characters like they're dolls in a playset, and they're having the time of their life. And that sense of enjoyment is frankly infectious. When the dark elf with the writer's block is forcing them to act lovey-dovey against their will by acting out romantic stage plays, and it's just full of classic rom-com tropes and archetypes, and it leads to all these hijinks that both she and us are just eating up. It's pure fun. But as I said, while it can invoke pure fun, the story knows how to tie those fun moments together into a meaningful story. The story itself is about the characters having fun, and how that causes Charlotte to grow past her abuse. I described Alan as a manic pixie dream boy, but that was mostly a joke. Charlotte really starts carrying her weight in the story, gaining magical powers that she proactively uses, supporting Alan in addition to him supporting her, and they grow into what is genuinely a really lovable love story. One last thing that the story does that really adds to this is its setting. The anachronistic aspects of it gives the story an abstract vibe that lets it slowly shift from one tone to another, because we can just have random aspects of modern day inserted into this medieval fantasy world, and because magic can replicate aspects of modern technology, no small amount of revenge wedding vibes. But the cool aspect of this is that it lets the author switch from one archetype to another. The fact that there is a spa resort and then a petting zoo randomly in this story just feels natural, and so we can easily insert all of the attendant tropes of a variety of plot beat archetypes that we want to see happen for the sake of archetype layering. It all just comes together splendidly. This video was something of an unintended sequel to my video on Kimi-sen, where I discuss how fanfiction writing techniques make their way into modern-day original media, and I think it's another really good example of how, as time goes on, our understanding of writing evolves, with new techniques being invented and perfected, and I just think that's the coolest stuff ever. If you like what I do on this channel, then make sure to like and subscribe with notifications on, make out with a like button, and unleash your hot, creamy opinions into the comment section, and if you want me to keep making these videos, support me on Patreon. And as always, a big thank you to my patrons, with an especially big thank you to my Tier 2 patrons, Bellman, Carolyn Vig, and Love Your Content. Thanks for the support.